with things. And I think it all comes down to the fact that we've got huge global uncertainties. You could point at the fact that perhaps the world is overpopulated. We're struggling with things that are, I think, in many cases of our own our own volition. Climate change, the number of wars around the world is frightening at the moment, and all of those things are destabilizing our lives, the supply chain, logistics, all of the things that we've taken for granted. And I think things are changing, and it's gonna, they're catching up with us. So we really need to focus on what we're going to do about it. Because, as I said, I love having risk conversations, but the thing that comes out of risk conversations is action. You've got to do something about it. And there's a lot of people out there protesting. There are people out there saying things got to change. That is, it's quite difficult to enact change in the environment that we're in these days. But we all have to, we have to play our part. And I think one of the biggest things we can do is help change mindsets, because mindsets help people make better decisions. That's why we're called risk decisions. Years ago, people used to ask me, what does that mean? What does risk decisions mean? I don't have to explain that to anybody anymore. It's just obvious, and people see it as an absolutely fundamental thing that they need to get better at. It's not all negative. There are positives, the opportunity side of things, digitization, or the whole move to digital transformation. AI, is it an opportunity or a threat? It's certainly going to change our lives, and we have to try and capitalise on it. All forms of innovation and trying to improve productivity. That's good for some people, bad for others. But of course, risk is not a simple, straightforward, negative, positive thing. You can have a risk that's a positive thing for somebody, one person, and a negative thing for another person, the same risk. So these things they're quite nuanced, and it's an interesting, thinking it through. Often taking an individual risk, you can take quite a long time just trying to understand that risk and make sure you don't implement things, carry out actions that have unintended consequences. And of course, these days we have a never-ending amount of compliance, the oversight, scrutiny. We've got internal and external audit, and we all know if we're involved in big major projects, lots of them have government money behind them, and you're going to get scrutiny. You're going to have the National Audit Office, or your internal controls and governance overarching your project. So whereas we used to be able to just get on with things, nowadays there's a lot more red tape, a lot more things to think about, and kind of quite rightly so. But it does make projects and programs quite, even more difficult to do. So there was a time when we just used to focus on, doing projects right, and then we went, we really need to do the right projects as well. And there we started to focus on business cases and all of those things, trying to bring things on time and on budget, and delivering what we say we're going to deliver. But actually, projects now sit in a really complex environment, and so we are finding that we've got even more challenges to strive to achieve our deliverables and benefits and all the things we're trying to do, and managing the budgets. All of those things are very difficult. So what we need is a best practice risk framework. So this is what I see as quite a high level view of a structured approach. So Karen said, one of the things that I spend my time doing is working with customers, looking at how to structure their risk across their organisation. Because nowadays, the executive board really want to know what's going on, and they want to know now. So if something comes up in the headlines, if uncertainty is hitting us faster and faster, so senior management want to know what's going on with projects, programs, in operations, in the market, in the context of all the things that are going on. So we have a lot of stakeholders involved in delivering anything at business level, government level, project level. So if we look at starting with the customer, at enterprise level, as I was saying, people want real-time information because they need to make strategic decisions. And some of the things that are happening now are people focusing much more on looking at future horizon planning, scenario planning. What would we do if this scenario happened? And of course, we got caught with the pandemic. Everybody, it wasn't something that was like unheard of. It's happened before. People were just not ready for it. And now I think people are aware that they need to be a bit more ready to pivot, to respond to those kind of big events happening. At portfolio level, you need to make sure that you've got a sound business case, and you're looking at all those good kind of strategic things around objectives, outcomes, benefits. And it isn't, one of the things that I'm involved in at the moment with Steve is the BSI project controls guide, where we're trying to help people focus not just on project control at the coalface level. It's also make sure the control is happening at the enterprise level, at the strategic level, because projects need help from the enterprise, and the enterprise needs to know what's going on in projects. So, prime contractors.
Val, I've just noticed I put my hand up.
Oh, right, okay.
Could I just clarify this? The BSI 202001 is actually not a guide, it's a specification standard, right?
Yes.
Which means that there's a whole list, I think currently, of 81 requirements that have to be observed or responded to. So in a specification standard is basically outlining what the requirements are for the mobilisation and good practice and enforcement of project controls. So it's not just a for information, shove it on the shelf. So I'd like to differentiate that, and it'll be out in a couple of months' time, we think. Thank you.
Yeah. So, we need things to help us. These kind of structures and guides and standards. Okay, so then if we look at business level, well, the business is focused on understanding performance throughout the organisation, and not just KPIs, because of course KPIs can drive behaviours in a way you don't necessarily want things to go. Actually getting under the bonnet of what's going on, looking at causes, consequences, not just controls but actions, preventative. What could you do if it happens? Because one of the things that we encourage people to do is to take risks, but to take measured risks. Take a risk, know what you're going to do to correct a problem if it does materialize. So you don't have to just look at preventing every risk. You should actually be looking at what risk could I take? Where can I get competitive advantage? Are there risks I could take more readily and safely than somebody else? That might give you a business advantage. And I've already mentioned audit. Compliance. Well, compliance is the bane of many of our lives, and whether it's following ISO 27001 or our environmental standard systems, or health and safety, and all the legal things we have to do, GDPR, I mean, you name it, we've got it in spades. We're doing all of this stuff. But one of the things in a risk framework you're trying to do is break down the silos that often exists across the organisation, because actually and this is one of the things I'm going to go on to show you, looking at how those, instead of seeing those things as a drag and a red card on you, how can you make them into a positive thing that's actually helping you to propel your company, your project, your whatever you're involved in? How can you have it help you propel yourself forward? So one of the things that we've done over the last 2 or 3 years is we've implemented ISO 27001. That's relevant to us because we sell software, we sell hosted software, we sell to some of the biggest, most security conscious organizations in the world. And that's not just defense. Our customers in the electricity business are even more conscious of all of the things that they're trying to protect from a cyber security point of view. The change control we have to go through is massive. So, but whereas we are focused on cybersecurity, other people might be focused on environmental, or there are many different areas that you might be that might be key to your organisation. But overarching all of that, we have the need to have good risk conversations. We need to get people talking, because when you talk, you know, people love to talk about and identify problems and risks, actually. And I know, Steve, you joke about it, but when you get people talking, you often can't stop them. The thing that's more painful is actually having done the problem solving, which is quite enjoyable, you then actually have to go out and do the actions, and that's the thing that's a bit more tricky. And all of this wraps up into the governance piece of responsibility and accountability. And you have both organizational governance, and you also have project and program governance. So it sits at all levels of the organization. So have we got any questions? Because I'm going to go on and do a little bit of a sort of an example of how you might start having conversations about risk. Anybody? Or any thoughts? Suggestions?
Adrian's got his hand up. Adrian?
Okay.
Yeah, it probably leads into what you're about to say, I think. You've mentioned mindsets and behaviors a few times. Where do they fit into sort of the risk framework? Because there's the old adage that you can have the best governance and assurance you like, but in the end, it's people that deliver or don't when it comes to projects or anything else.
Yeah. Well, I think that's where the framework comes in, and actually there's another level above the framework which I'm not going to cover today, because I didn't want to go too far up. I want to go down into projects and programs a bit more. But the next level up from the risk framework is what I call the risk vision. So just like you have your company mission statement, values, vision for the company, or all of those things, and you've got your strategic level of organizational structure. One of the things that I do with organizations is help people define their risk vision. So, and by that, what I mean is different companies who might appear at surface value to be similar may have a completely different view of risk. Now, I hesitate to use the word risk attitude, risk tolerance, risk appetite, all of those things, because they tend to be the things that get pushed down into the organization to define. And I think a risk vision for the company is an overarching view of how risk meets your very high level strategic objectives. So to give you a simple example, at face value, British Airways and Ryanair, they both fly airplanes and take passengers around the world. I know they're slightly different depending on whether you look at one as a long haul carrier and one as a more short haul, but they still do the same sort of thing. But they've got very different business models, and they have a totally different vision for risk. So a prime carrier like British Airways worry about their reputation, looking after customers. They have a very big focus on customer satisfaction, particularly because they make a lot of money out of the North American, North Atlantic route. And so, anything that hits their reputation, like the Heathrow Terminal 5 problems, it took them a long time to recover from that. Whereas Ryanair, their view is, it's cheap, isn't it? That you get what you pay for. Do you want to go to the toilet on the plane? Well, we might make you pay for that. So it's, and I got stuck in the ash cloud. I was in Madrid and I couldn't fly home. I was actually on the EasyJet, who weren't quite as bad as Ryanair. Ryanair didn't even put people up in a hotel. They let them sleep in the airport. And Ryanair admitted they only had, I think it was 2 or 3 people on their complaints department customer service desk, because as far as they're concerned, forget it, don't complain. You know, you get what you pay for. So it's a very different business model. It's a very different attitude and a very different vision for risk, depending on what, you know, how you operate your business. And thinking about that from the very top down is quite important, because too often you know, there are people in the organisation who are very risk averse, but actually risk averse is very bad generally, because it's a mindset of don't take any risk. And either that means you're paying over the odds for things, or you're pretending risk is not happening and it's not there, and then it's likely to hit you. So having a proactive statement about your risk-taking approach, I think, is very important, and then flowing that down through the organisation. So does that kind of give a view of what I see as mindset?
That's excellent. Thank you, Val.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, right. Well, I'm going to delve down into the project level, because we do a lot of work with projects, but I'm going to do it from the point of view of projects looking a bit wider at risks, not just purely at, say, how do I deliver on time and on budget. So let's have a look at a set of risks. So here we go. This is just a simple risk register. It's the sort of thing people are grown at, because you think, oh, you know, I'm going to sit here and we're going to wade through this set of risks, and obviously management are going to focus on what are those high ones and what's, you know, and I'm looking at this from a program level with a bunch of projects inside, and it doesn't matter what business, you know, what sector you're in. This happens to be a structure of defence programs, but it could be infrastructure, it could be energy, it can be anything like. And then at a higher level, you've got all the infrastructure of your organisation. And one of the things that we're encouraging people to do is to not just look at this as lists of risks and trying to wade through, you know, what's the score and what are you doing about it, because that's a very transactional approach to managing risk. What we want to do is encourage people to have conversations. So in the interests of this being Conversation Club, I've got a visualization here of risk. So this is looking at the same risks as we were looking at in that register, but it's in a completely different, you know, giving people a completely different view. So one of the things that you know, we do is go out and help people structure these things and say, okay, we're going to do a risk review, but we're going to do it by looking at the risks and how they're all connected together and how they're grouped together, and you know, how big they are. And I'm guessing it's a fairly obvious thing here that there's a risk in the middle that is linked to lots of other risks. And that risk, even though it's orange, which I'm sure you know from the traffic lighting of risks, you've got red, amber, green, yellow, maybe, you know, green, we've got opportunity on here. But it's being amber, you wouldn't necessarily have picked that out to review in your risk meet, in your review meeting, your project meeting. But when you look at it like this, you can see that it impacts on all sorts of different things. And so if you then aggregate that across all those different items, you might see this is really much more important. And also, in this case, we're looking at this from a grouping of functional areas. So actually, because it's kind of a bit more exciting to look at it live, I'm going to switch to, if I can take a view. Now, can you see my browser screen? No, I have to move it across.
Not yet, but I think this is very exciting, Val, because I remember when I used to get students to do risk registers, you could see exactly some things caused other things and were they separate risks or not. So I love this idea about grouping them and looking at the relationships between them, which is presumably where you're going with this sort of conversational idea. Yeah.
Right. Can you see that now?
Yeah, something's changed now. Yeah.
Okay, so on the left-hand side, we've got this structure with all our risks in it, and you might want me to make that a little bigger so that you can see it better. Is that better? Yeah, right, so this is our whole organisation, and at the top, we've got various things like, you know, we've got strategy risks, and we've got all our functions here that are human resources and finance and so on, so they can look at their risks. And we've got our various different standards and internal controls that are so important now. And then we've got a structure with our business units, and we've got defence and renewables, utility, and so on, all the way down through here. So it doesn't matter what your structure is. The most important thing about this is that until for a very long time, and I've fought it for now, it feels like decades, especially where people are doing risk management on spreadsheets. It's so siloed, and it's easy for the person who's doing the risk management in their little area. So, for example, we could look at Project C. Project C is a tiddly little project, and it's only got 4 risks in it. Sorry, I thought I clicked on that. There we go. So there, Project C has only got 4 risks in it. They're scored at a different level because it's only, maybe a few million pounds. But you might look at another project, and this one, if we look at Project A. Sorry, my mouse doesn't seem to be clicking properly. There we go. If we look at Project A, there's some more risks in it, and that might be a bigger project. And then you go up to the program level, so you can see all the risks in there. But you might want to look at it in any way you might, in different ways. So you might actually create a list and say, I want to look at it by country. I want to look at the engineering risks. I want to look at the European risks. I want to look at the finance risks. You can, you make folders of risks, and you can link them together and say, and you can have parent-child relationships. And the thing you're then aiming to do is to put it together as a picture that tells a story, because when you start telling stories, it's much more compelling, and people see why you're going to want to try and do something about these things. So here, I'm going to create a visualization of the risks I'm looking at here. And it works by choosing what area. So you could say, I want to look at it by country, or I want to look at it by geopolitical category, or I want to look at it by supplier. You might want to look at risks across your entire set of risks, and you might be worried about suppliers who are, you might categorize them. Here we've got level 1 suppliers, level 2 suppliers, but you might want to know about suppliers that are based in the geographical area. You might do two types of categorizations. So I've got some risks set up where we can look at the ones I was showing you on that other screen by functional area, and it allows you to go and have a look at those. And this is now quite interactive. So, for example, if I want to do a workshop with a bunch of people, what you can do is move these things around. So you might say, actually, I want to highlight the health and safety risks. So I'm going to put those up there. What about this? Why is that risk not linked to anything? I've got some stuff that are orphaned, and so so what you're doing is you're actually starting to showing somebody something which on the screen means something to them. So if you've got the IT manager in the room, you know what they're going to be looking at. They're going to be looking at this bunch of IT risks. And one of the things you're going to do is say, okay, so, and this happens to be one of the key risks I've focused on here is recruitment and retention. So workforce planning is huge these days. You've got problems with hybrid working, shortage of skilled workers, all sorts of problems, labour costs, the whole thing. And so you can then start asking questions about, okay, so you've got a risk here. We got linked to the shortage of cybersecurity skills, but is that the only problem you've got with workforce? And of course, what you're going to do then is, as soon as people can see there's something in it for them, then they're going to go, oh, actually, no, there's more things that are really important. And it may even be that you've got things like here, we've got this risk, which is flooding of site, because you might have, if a data center gets taken out, what kind of built-in redundancy have you got? So you might have risks that are linked to specific climate change issues. So here we've got extreme weather up here affecting operations, high winds, so you might want to look at this from any different perspective that is relevant to you. So, and one of the things that we've done here is done this from this is the risks. These are the risks in this program. So there will be obviously more risks that are that you might want to identify down at project level, but you could, the idea is that you put it together and you present it based on your view of risk and the conversations you want to start, and it just goes from there. And the way the benefit is that you're starting to break down silos. And I've run workshops where we get once you've got your risk vision at the top level, you've got your risk framework. The next level you have is a risk steering group. The steering group will have heads of various, whether it's business units, key people representing different areas of the organisation, down to key projects and programmes. And so you get people in a room and they start talking to each other when they can also see each other's risks. So, one of the things that I always remember was running kicking off a new risk steering group in a company, and it turns out that there's a whole bunch of people in the project saying, well, of course, the big problem is going to be the upgrades to Windows 10. And the IT manager's like, sorry, I didn't realise that was a big problem. And they're saying, well, yeah, because we've got key milestones and you're telling us you're going to take systems down over a period of time. Only last week we were talking to a customer, and we were the ones that told the customer that their procurement system, their e-procurement billing and procurement system is going down for 3 weeks, because we got informed. They didn't know in the organisation. So people are just not having conversations with each other. They're not talking to each other, and getting them together across the table and starting with these sort of, just questions around what each other are facing and how they interlink with each other is, I think, absolutely fascinating. Anyway, I find it fascinating. So, yeah, I think I've probably talked enough. So how do you approach this kind of level of getting people engaged in risk, I suppose, because I spend a lot of my time focused on that.
I think that was fantastic. So thank you very much indeed, Val, for introducing us to those ideas. I mean, it seems to me it's almost doing for risk what WBS and PBS do for other types of sort of things we manage in projects. But as you and I have had discussions about this, I would argue that probably, if there weren't any risks, you probably wouldn't need project managers or program managers, because you could just plan it and it would all happen perfectly. So I would put this absolutely at the heart of managing projects and managing programs. And I love the way you can group them interactively and then change those relationships and you say the conversational aspect of it was absolutely central to people sort of not knowing what's going on. So yes, I haven't seen any hands go up yet, but I'm sure there will be. But in the meanwhile, my sort of questions I was going to ask you were about what examples you could give us of sort of, and you may have, I think you've already touched on some of these, of opportunities that have been uncovered by your clients through using this, and indeed what are their challenges, what are the biggest challenges they encounter when you suddenly sort of put them in the room and it suddenly goes well.
Yeah, I think, one of the things, talking to one of our customers a couple of weeks ago, and he was saying that they have introduced that when they get their auditors in, you get opportunities for improvement, and when they do their project reviews and they do peer reviews, and this is a big defence customer, and they're doing very high level, lots of IT projects and stuff, and they said that they've turned around the way they think about those findings from audits and turning them into opportunities for improvement, which then they actually put into the risk opportunity database. And one of the ones that he's very proud of, because he got an award for it, is that, and this was because he was working on environmental stuff, is that they identified that they should put together a business case for putting solar panels on all their offices, and part of that came out of their environmental management plan. that I had in place. So you actually find, the kind of findings or the negatives, if you can turn those into positives, often you can actually look at a risk and see it as a potential opportunity. So many of, one of the things that I see these days is people talking about minimum viable product. So instead of taking forever to produce something, what can you do within the least amount of time? How do you manage people's expectations? What are the risks of delivering something incrementally? Similarly, the whole digital and digitization program around in companies, people are looking at digital twins. That's a big thing. So, you're not building, it's what you do in software all the time. You build prototypes, you plan and you design something before, you don't just go out and build it. And the digital twin focus is also great for product risk management. And a lot of products out there are things which are huge, where the product maintenance is projects in its own right. So upgrades, like if you've got a ship or a fleet of aeroplanes or whatever, the maintenance program is enormous. You've got an ongoing activity that is needed in order to keep your operations running smoothly. So I suppose we used to years ago have things that were focused on time, I can't think of the name of it. Where you look at the efficiency of a system and try and work out how to make it more efficient. And I think we're sort of coming back to that idea that you don't have to create this mega project. You can create it and develop it in incremental chunks, but you have to manage the risks all the way through that and have to manage expectations.
Lovely, thank you.
So again, it's mindset. I think it's the mindset that it's a cup half full, not a cup half empty. So don't look at a risk and say, "Oh, that's terrible." Look at a risk and say, "Okay, let's put our heads together." And sometimes, as an example, one of the biggest risks I think we ever took in the company was we completely rebuilt our software in 2015-16, and we told our customers we're going to cut out a lot of functionality because it was just too complicated. And we knew that there were customers who used that functionality. So we said, look, we're really sorry, and we'll take you with us in the next release after that, or the one after that. We'll talk to you about, when we're going to take you and build that functionality back into the software. We have never had as many customers go to a 0.0 release as that release, as fast as they did. So we saw it as a risk, because we thought that we could lose customers because we were telling them, sorry, we're not going to, you won't want it because we're going to not build all the things into it. And actually they turned around and went, prefer the clean new interface and the new capabilities. And I'm not really sure we were using that other stuff. People hang on to things.
Val, you've got a queue for me here. You've got loads of questions.
Sorry.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll go in strict order.
Jones.
So we'll go David first, then we'll go to Stephen, AJ, and then Andrew. So David.
I'll determine who gets asked, please, Karen. Thank you. David, go on.
I've got a question. Yeah, interesting what you've been talking about. What I'm interested in is all that sort of stuff that you've been showing. But if, say, for an organisation that's got quite a low risk management capability, but also a low risk appetite.
Yeah.
The stuff that you showed, how do you culturally, what are the sort of steps that you need to sort of take to start to not build the capability, but the culture, and start to increase the sort of risk appetite and show the sort of commercial and competitive sort of advantage and that type of thing? Is that what I'm interested in? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that the main thing is to keep it really simple. And because unfortunately, risk management has been hijacked by gurus for years, decades. And the lovely people, like many of those they are, the organisations have allowed that to happen because people are quite happy for somebody in the corner to do risk management for them. So those people have developed their little fiefdoms, and and we have to wrestle it off them. And basically, the other thing we have to do is say, okay, we're going digital. We need all this data centrally. You're not going to use your spreadsheet anymore, because people constantly fall back to spreadsheets, and they are terrible. They're an awful way of managing risk. There's no audit trail. You can't share them properly. I know you can put them on SharePoint, but it's a terrible way of doing stuff. There's no approval process. There's no, so you're better off to manage 10 risks properly than 100 or 1,000 risks across your organization badly. Keep it simple. Yeah, I know one of our customers a few years ago took over in an organization. He looked at the risks in the organization and went, right, I want you to close out all the risks except your top 10 risks. If you've got a few more that you can convince me that you should keep open, fine. But I want you to just focus on managing a small number of risks well. And I'm going to focus on giving you the mitigation budget if you can demonstrate you've managed that risk well. And it transformed the organization. It just takes a little bit of guts just to say, stop doing this, stop making it complicated. It's not complicated.
Yeah, I mean, it's that sort of boil in the ocean sort of syndrome, isn't it? But I mean, I'm not a massive sort of risk practitioner, but I've done like from cost risk and stuff like that. And the usual sort of advice that I understood was that for a project, it was like 30 or 40 sort of risks were sort of manageable. But at a strategic level, would you say that it's 10 that you should just focus on the
well, I mean, it's as many as you can manage. But if you've got 100 risks, have you got 100 people managing those? Have they not got a day job?
No. I mean, this is
that's
like,
the question you have to ask.
Yeah, I mean, I'm even thinking like top 3, to be honest with you. That's the sort of level I'm sort of thinking of.
I mean, if you're a senior manager, what you want to know is people are managing the things that matter, that are important. But the other thing you can do is you can kind of categorize risks, or you can grade them in ways which, if somebody wants to have 30 risks at their level, you just recalibrate and aggregate them up at a higher level, and you just take the noise out. So but keep it simple is the most important thing. Yeah.
Can I just put a follow-on question, if that's all right? Sorry. Yeah. But if your data quality is not amazing, and I'm talking about because it's quite an intensive sort of process, isn't it? Collecting risk data. I mean, I was an 800M as a risk manager, and it was like a full-time role. How do you sort of understand? I mean, I'm guessing it's like scenario modeling or something along those sort of lines. Where do you look to sort of focus those sort of data collection?
I mean, we've taken a steer from our customers that actually, again, in the theme of have less risks and do them well. And we've just we've got a new version coming out now that we've added bow tie functionality into. Now, there was a time when I saw that as a bit kind of bit controls and internal controls and kind of compliance based, but actually it's now really spreading, and our customers in Australia they're queuing up to take the new version. But when you do that, you actually break a risk down into its causes, its consequences, the controls, the actions, look at it pictorially. So even though we're looking at, I'm showing you the picture of a linked risk visualization, the bow tie visualization is a fantastic way, again, of getting people engaged and talking about risks, because as soon as you get them involved in it, they really do excel. I
mean, I've done a few turnarounds recently, and that has been where the biggest impact has been that sort of workshop that you're sort of talking about has sort of really helped. Okay, fantastic. I'm going down the right approach then. Fantastic.
Yeah, I think so.
Thanks,
keep it
David.
simple.
Thank you, David. Next one up, Stephen Burns.
Hi, Val. Thanks very much for that. That was really good. For me, just looking at how do you stratify the levels on is this more targeted towards a sort of C-suite environment, you know, so they're managing the risk coming down? And also, without creating a fiefdom, is there a section of the organisation that's probably better equipped to manage risk than anybody else?
Well, I mean, my philosophy is that anybody who needs to manage a risk or have an action should have it. So it should be distributed. And as I was saying just now, take out the risk gurus, I'm afraid. They should be just going around and helping people, not doing it for them. So the biggest problem we've got is people doing risk for other people, and they're not doing risk for other people, they're just administering risk for other people. And people are quite happy for that to happen, because they see risk as a negative thing that they don't want to have to do. So in terms of the structural stuff, I mean, if you go back to the to the hierarchy structure, then what you really want to do is give people the right level of access to risk. Sorry, I was just trying to click on the you just put people in whatever folder they belong in. So if they're the human resources manager, you put them in the human resources folder, but you also give them, you teach them and share lists with them of all the HR risks across the whole database. So they can then, instead of having HR or health and safety or environmental just inventing their own risks, they should be searching the database and looking for the risks and picking them up and gathering them and aggregating them. So, so one of the things I love to do with customers is, you go on site, they open up their risk register and you go, okay, how do you get people engaged? Right, just ask somebody, what are you interested in? So you just type into the search bar, and I did this in a company who were really worried about, I think they were trying to source titanium for their projects or their manufacturing process. So I said, well, is that what managers are worried about? And they said, well, yeah. So we typed titanium into the search box and it came up with 12 risks across their database. And they just like, wow, it's like, do that with your managers, do it live. Don't, make risk, bring it alive. Don't have it something that sits in a filing cabinet, or you only dig out the night, the afternoon before you got to go to a risk review meeting. Make it a real live happening thing.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Stephen. Who's next? AJ?
Hi, Val. AJ Patel here, Head of Risk for TfL. Thanks for the presentation. Really well pulled together, and I am a fan of sort of visualizing and telling a story. I think where the issues lie and problems, whether you're linking or bow tying, particularly with major projects, it can become quite a bit of an exercise. And I absolutely hear you in terms of trimming it down, focusing on what the key solutions are. And it's all around conversation, really, and trying to get to the heart of those issues. But my question is around thinking ahead and into the future. Do you think AI and ML is going to help us in this world to be able to develop better visualizations a lot easier, that not just the top end risk managers are used to being able to pull together, but a range of risk managers? Where do you see that?
Yeah, well, I think AI is a really big topic, and it's going to happen, and it's going to support risk. The big problem at the moment is the quality of risk data is so poor. And I'm sure, TfL is one of the more, advanced and risk managers working in TfL are pretty amazing people. So, I'm sure that you've got better. Yeah, well, I mean, I meet quite a lot of people in my travels, and you can quickly tell people who know one end of a risk from another from the people who don't. But I think, even in organisations where there is a good structure and history of data, it's still probably, I mean, one of the biggest problems, even in a risk mature organisation, is people don't close risks out properly. They don't close them out saying, they don't do lessons learned. They don't say what happened. So you've got a whole bunch of risks sort of sitting up in the air that got closed out, just because it was like, you know, it's a bit like, you know, great art, you abandon it, you don't, you know, you never finish it. Well, if in order to get good AI, and at the moment the only, you know, the claims around AI on risk are about building project schedules and being able to build them with risk inbuilt. I'm skeptical at this stage, you know, because there isn't good enough data, you know, and also my worry is, you know, machine learning is gonna get there. So we will have tools that really help with risk in the future, but machine learning also there's a danger of bias, repeating the mistakes of the past. You know, I know the idea is that you should be able to filter out all those mistakes. I'm not sure that data is good enough at the moment. And, you know, do we have enough data? Do we have enough historic data? You know, some of our customers, one of the moves to digitization, they take the risk data out into their data lakes, and, you know, they suck it and put it into their big systems, doing a load of data analytics, but it's going to take a long time before we've got good enough data. I think that's my opinion, but we need to start working on it now.
Thank you. Fair and honest answer. Cheers.
Thanks, AJ. Andrew or John, Steve Jones, did you have your hands up earlier?
Yep, I did.
Go on, Steve.
Right, you might have touched on it just a second ago, but how, when you said like you did it live and you had 12 risks come up, how do you know that people are not describing the same risk differently?
Well, I mean, when you search for risks, there's almost always a benefit you get out of it, even if it's just to find repeat items. So it's the same risk. To find, I mean, yeah, if somebody were to choose a word and you type it in and no risks came out of the system, then you'd also have to say, well, there's a hole in your system then. If you're worrying about something and there's no risk that has that keyword in it, then why not? And you can try a few keywords. I mean, this is where you know, AI is going to start helping with nudging people and things. So, you know, being able to type things in and get it to give you some kind of feedback on the data it can find. But if you do have, it's very common to see a risk system that's got a lot of risks that are repeated, but often they're repeated in all the different silos they're in. And the benefit of finding those is that you might be able to manage them more cheaply, more efficiently at a higher level. So you take them all and you join them together with the parent risk. You can still leave the risk at the local level, and but you take it out. Like you're gonna, these days you can have skills shortages or recruitment problems, or they're going to be everywhere in people's databases, and that's what the HR manager should be looking for. What are the skill shortages? What are the, you know, how do I take a set of data and make something of it, doing some analysis of it? So, and I think, was it Karen asking about the top down versus the bottom up? You do it both ways.
And the other thing you said about AI, which it was quite interesting as well, because it might perceive risks as differently. So I was asking it about agile and the advantages and disadvantages. I was quite surprised that one of the disadvantages it came up with is you don't get excessive documentation, which is kind of an advantage of agile, not a disadvantage. So its perception of what's good and what's bad can be different to what ours is. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, and yeah, as I said, one man's risk is another man's opportunity, and don't underestimate the law of unintended consequences. I've seen people manage risks extremely well at one level and then find that it popped out. I mean, a good example of that actually was one of the Apollo missions. I was talking to somebody from George Washington University, and he said that there was a big problem with one of the Apollo missions where a subcontractor realized that they could buy off the shelf one of the components that were going to go into Apollo, and it was going to be much faster. They could deliver it faster, they could deliver it cheaper, they could offer the customer the benefit. So they did it without telling people. They came up with this opportunity. It wasn't an opportunity at all, because they didn't realize it was one of those cases where this was metric and they were trying to put it into an imperial platform, and it didn't work. So completely backfired on them. lost them time, lost them money. So yeah, opportunities are just can be risks as well. That's why conversations are so important. Don't try and surprise. I mean, no manager I've ever met, no senior manager ever wanted a surprise, to be honest. They, you know, an opportunity as a surprise is not good. They want to know about things in advance. So
yeah. And the talking bit's important as well, because I can just give you an example. We had a risk, and the impact was, well, you wouldn't get access to SAP. And the guy said, well, what does that mean? He says, well, you won't be able to use SAP. He said, but yeah, what does that mean in terms of what will I be able to do in the business now? And it kind of like, oh, right, okay. I didn't realise that, you know, it's not just a matter of you won't get access to it. So, well, what does that mean to the business now? And it's only by having those conversations, I think, that you get to understand what the impact really is.
Yeah, and I mean, that's one of the things that we're doing now with this bow tie is that, you know, what you say is, okay, what's the risk? The risk sits in the middle here. So then you go back through that. Okay, what's causing that? Okay, what are the consequences? You know, you actually work it through, because often people come up with there's a risk we can't use SAP. What does that mean? You know, it means nothing on its own. So often you need to, you know, to extract it out of people, you really need to, you know, and doing interactive stuff and saying, you know, okay, you know, how effective, you know, what are these red things on the screen? It's what people respond to. So even though I wouldn't necessarily be the first person to be doing everything through a bow tie, and you've got to be careful you don't throw, you know, solutions at problems that aren't really fit for purpose. But sometimes you've just to engage people. You know, engagement is everything. Getting the conversation going, and it's much easier to do it when you've got this sort of visual. Well, I'm a visual person, so you know, I'm not good at. I'm a very slow reader, so, and I use that to my advantage. I'm a slow reader, which means I want it to fit on a page. Right, Steve.
Thank you. I think one more maybe, because we're on 5 o'clock, unless we're running on. Well, maybe two. Andrew, please go ahead.
Thanks, Steve. Hi, Val. I had a whole load of questions, but for the sake of time, I'll keep it down to one. You mentioned earlier on when you were giving your presentation about use of scenarios, and I'm just curious, because you've gone with the title all the way through about risk, but you mentioned the word uncertainty. I mean, in my former life as an academic, I've written quite extensively on the difference between risk and uncertainty. Risk being that you've got data on. Do you find that the conversations are different when you move from talking about the risks that everybody's got on their risk registers and where you've got, you know, your scores and stuff, to where you're starting to talk about the more vague? Because a lot of the things that you said at the very beginning, the geopolitical stuff, is stuff that we worry about, but we haven't necessarily got the data on.
Yeah. So I think that, I mean, there are a lot of people that I've talked to that I have a lot of time for who understand risk, who will often say, actually, it's the uncertainties that's a much bigger thing than risk. I think that the main reason for that is exactly what you said. When you've got risks and you've captured them, and you're, you know, if you're even halfway competent at doing something about risk, then you're already, you know, you're preparing yourself for it. I think that with the uncertainty, what's more important, like if you take pandemic, for example, there's lots of things like that may or may not happen. It's, you know, there isn't, you can't put a probability on it because you don't know, you know, when it's going to happen, and it's a scenario. It's almost a scenario, really, that you might find yourself in. The most important thing to do is to think through how. I mean, this is where resilience comes in, and you know, I find that word difficult because resilience kind of implies you're just going to take yourself back to where you were before. It's like, you know, it doesn't encourage people to think horizon planning and future is about staying where you are, and I don't think anybody can afford to stay where they are in this current environment of uncertainty. So it comes back to mindset, that it's those things that people find too difficult to think about, that those uncertainties that they can't pin down. And so what you need to do is think about it more as kind of stress testing your business. It's not business continuity planning. That's too tactical and too transactional. It's much more about thinking how, thinking out of the box, getting, and you need diverse ideas, diverse thinking in a room in order to do that. So it aligns itself much more with strategic planning. And I mean, there are other people, I mean, the words and definitions for uncertainty get mixed up as well, because a lot of people use uncertainty when you get down to the level of quantitative analysis and stuff. Yeah. But even there, that kind of uncertainty is difficult as well, because you can't predict interest rates, labour rates. Everybody got caught because they just borrowed money when interest rates were low. But you've got to understand and think through what's going to happen when they're not low, because there will be a time in the future you have to catapult yourself forward. And I do a presentation on 2020 vision. It's on our website if you want to watch it, where I actually talk about you've got to catapult yourself into the future and look back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hindsight is basically you want to learn how to build hindsight into your decision making.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I think drawing to Adrian, are you still with us? Yes, no?
Sorry, yes, microphone again. Yeah, absolutely. I'm still here. Yeah.
Did you have a question?
I did, but it's okay. It's
right.
It's fine. Yeah.
Well, you can link to me on LinkedIn. I'm easy to find because you just type Val Jonas in, ask me questions if you want. Yeah.
Okay.
Happy to talk. Happy to have more conversations.
Yes, this could run and run. We'll have to have you back at some point, Val.
Sure. I
think so. Karen, is there any closing remarks you wish to offer?
Just a huge thank you to Val. I thought that was very insightful. Great to see technology actually changing mindset, which I think that does. Clearly, it's allowing that to happen. So very, very excited to see that. Thank you for sharing that. And the real time. I know it's always risky when you do that, but very brave of you. So thank you very much indeed for that. And just to let everybody know, the next Conversation Club will be on the Thursday, the 25th of April, when we will be hearing from Steve Carver about building a passive house. So passive house. So that's about all from